Hello everyone, reporting today for Fun Robotics Network. I'm Abbas, and with me here is Team 23435, the Gyrobotic Droids from Westchester, Ohio. They've been absolutely incredible this Decode season. They're currently ranked 3rd in the world, 4th by Teleop OPR, 8th by Auto OPR, and just have one of the best shooters in this Decode season. They have a really fantastic set of counter rollers, a super awesome articulating intake that gives them a very small form factor, all of that and more coming up on this Behind the Bot.
This video on fun is brought to you by viewers like you and also in partnership with the following. Take on the Decode season with Robotics, featuring their FTC starter bot, new 6mm hex shaft and motor options, and updated bevel gears. FTC teams can receive a 25% discount and apply for grants at studica.com/robots. FRCTs has been trusted by over 250 first teams to save on custom shirts and team apparel. Founded by first alumni and offering a free 14-day turnaround with faster options available, you can save time and money for your team when you get a free quote by scanning the QR code or going to frcts.com.
All right, Gyrobotic Droids. So first question I have to ask is regarding the footprint of your robot. I think every year you tend to make like very small robots. Why go for such a small one this year?
Main reason we want to do a small robot is for fitting in the base zone at the end. We can do a full part and our alliance partner can partial.
Okay, got it. That makes a ton of sense. Now, talking about packaging, with this small of a form factor, first of all, what are your robot dimensions? And, what special considerations did you have to have packaging-wise in order to fit everything in?
We're about 12-inch by 12-inch drivetrain with the intake retracted and 12 by 18 with the intake down. We just had to make sure that we could fit the artifact easily without going too tall, which was a temptation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can we see, like, under the robot how you're packaging all those motors? If there's any special belting considerations you had, or what teams can take from you to make really compact systems?
So the main thing we do that helps with making our robot very small is we have lots of bare motors. So we have many 2-stage reductions for the drive motors, so they can all be stacked in the back, versus using gearbox, we would have had to put them in the middle and make the robot taller so the artifacts would go over top of them.
Got it. Yeah, as far as gears go, I see you're running a lot of gears down there. Any issues with noise, or have you had to lubricate them or anything like that to make sure they're like always performing at a top level?
They are pretty loud, but we have not lubricated them. They have very little friction.
Got it. While we're down here, I see 2 servos you guys have with pretty big servo blocks. What's going on with those axons? What are you using them for?
We have 2 servos here. We are working on implementing a base where we lift our robot a few inches off the ground to take up half the box.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I guess we'll stay tuned to see how that turns out. So now jumping into the intake, I think your guys' intake has always been very famous this season, and you can recognize in any match you're playing or any video you post because of that articulating style. Have you had this, front active intake the entire season, or did you first start with it just static and then you made it pitch up and down?
We started with what we have now for intake.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Got it. And as far as powering that pitching, is it servo powered, 2 servos? How are you doing it?
It has 1 servo right here to pivot it up and down. It's just on a 40-48 gear ratio.
Okay. And now talking about that front intake shaft, we see a couple different wheels. We see the mecanum, surgical tubing, just what looks like maybe a cast wheel. Have you guys played around with like different types of wheels? And why did you settle on this design here?
So we spent a while, we want our intake to be as wide as possible, so we spent a while just testing out different ideas for that. We tried out wedges, but we found mecanum wheels seem to work the best for moving the ball sideways.
Okay, and as far as, combining wedges with the mecanum wheels, did you guys try that and you decided against it? Or was this just good enough that you never needed to increase the robot footprint?
Yes, because it changed the compression on the mecanum wheels, and you need it to be the same across all wheels for it to actually move the ball sideways.
That makes a ton of sense. Now, talking about powering the intake and up into the transfer, are your intake and uptake powered by the same system, or are you using 2 different motors?
They are powered by the same system. We have 1 motor that powers all our transfer rollers.
Okay, and so I guess if we can get a little up closer shot on that, that would be great. So it looks like you guys have a bare motor, and then what RPM are you guys running both of those uptake and intake at?
So we're running, this one bare motor has 2-stage reduction, and it's running the intake at about like 1,000, 1,200-ish RPM probably.
Got it. And the transfer is the same, or it's a different ratio?
Yeah, so that everything in the transfer, the intake and the transfer is all powered off this one rotor running the exact same speed.
Okay, that makes sense. And I see you guys have a couple different sets of wheels going on here. So walk me through all these custom silicone wheels that you have going and why you have them in different positions.
We like to say our intake has 4 stages. We have the initial stage, which is the drop down. First stage, which is these 2 silicone wheels here, which hold 1 ball. Second stage is our turn, so we touch the more closer to the side of the ball, which lets us make a tighter turn for the corner. And then finally we have our third stage, which has 2 smaller diameter wheels to allow it to slow down the ball a little bit before we put it into the shooter.
I see. Did you guys, were you running like a larger diameter center wheel and then you noticed you needed to slow it down, or how did you come up with using a smaller diameter wheel at that last stage?
Smaller diameter helps raise the ball all the way up to the shooter. It keeps contact as it goes through the turret better. Also, it just helps with getting rapid fires. You don't want to load the balls too fast, otherwise the third ball drops.
I see. And how are you guys preventing artifacts from prematurely going into the shooter?
We have a gate here that will block the artifacts from coming up early.
Okay, that's cool. It's cool that it's on the turret. I feel like most teams we've seen this season have their gate like under the shooter, but this is a really clever and compact solution. I like that a lot. Neat. As far as these custom silicone wheels go, what durometer are they? How did you guys cast them? Any tips you guys have for teams that are looking to make similar ones?
We use 38 durometer silicone from Amazon. Just use 2 parts and pour it in. Most of our wheels we leave overnight, so about 5 hours to set. We have been experimenting with using a heat bed on a 3D printer to solidify them faster. I was able to do one in about 30 minutes yesterday.
Oh wow, awesome. Yeah. And as far as compression goes, are you running these, like how much compression are you running on all of these wheels?
We have it varied throughout the shooter, or throughout the intake, but it's around 3 to 4 millimeters of compression at all parts to make sure we have constant contact.
Okay, is that on the 4.9 inch like measured artifact that people are seeing, or nominally on a 5-inch artifact?
On the 4.9 inch artifact, we designed everything around 4.9.
Got it. All right, let's jump into the shooter. You know, definitely one of the most unique parts of your guys' robot is that counter roller shooter. There's basically no spin at all when those artifacts are exiting. Have you had these counter rollers the entire season, or did you add them after seeing a need for them?
We originally started with 2 counter rollers just to counteract the backspin part of the balls, which they did work for that. But as we've gone on, we found out that the main cause for inconsistencies with distance when launching is different outtake velocity. So adding more rollers on the back actually makes it so the ball gains the same speed as the flywheel every single time. So it's always leaving the shooter at the same velocity, which makes it much easier for the coders to launch at the same distance.
Mm-hmm. Now, kind of looking at that transmission you guys have, I see a lot of little timing belts going on. Are those all GT2, GT3, or what are you running for those timing belts?
They are GT2 belts and like 22 pulleys.
I see. And how fast do those rollers have to spin in order to match the RPM of your shooter?
I believe we are running them at twice the RPM of the flywheel.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and your flywheel's at 6,000 RPM, or a little bit slower, a little bit faster?
The flywheel at 3,000 RPM.
3,000 RPM. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Now, as far as the weights go on the front of this flywheel, have you just added them throughout the season? Did you have them from the beginning and then realize you needed them? Walk me through the story there.
We originally just had the flywheel, but as we were experimenting with rapid fire, we kind of need more weight on the shooter. So we went and cut some steel discs and just kind of stacked them on until it worked.
I see. Now, looking, to the packaging of those counter rollers, why go with like I guess you guys have like 4 or 5 counter rollers back there? How'd you settle on that number? Did you try more or less?
We went for slightly larger diameter, so make it easier to match the surface speed of the flywheel without spinning them as fast. So then we just put as many as we could fit on the hood, which was 4.
We originally had 2, like you said before, but we added the other 2 because when the hood was all the way up, the flywheel would transfer more speed to the artifact versus when it was down. So that's why we added those extra 2 counter rollers so that the flywheel launch velocity would stay the same.
Yeah, that's very clever. And as far as powering these, are your two motors connected to both the front and the rear rollers, or is it one motor to the front roller or to the front wheel and the other motor to the rear wheel?
We have both motors are connected to one belt powering the front wheel, and then the shaft is reversed at a set of gears right here, which then is belted up to the top wheels.
Okay, got it. So now talking about your software stack behind all this shooting and stuff, let's first start with just not moving, right? Pretty simple case. How are you deciding how fast to shoot and the angle to shoot from?
Yeah, so our entire shooter code is all theory based. So we have specific formulas to try to launch the artifacts through a specific point in space and at a specific angle.
Okay, got it. I see. And as far as like calibration that was required to make sure these formulas translate onto the field performance, how much calibration did you have to do? Was it collecting just 5 points, 10 points, 50 points? What did that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so because our formulas are theory based, we need to be able to convert inches per second, which our calculations are in, to the ticks per second for the motors. So how we did this is we actually set up an experiment and used the range formula. So what we did is we set the hood angle at a specific angle and then spun up the flywheel to a specific speed, and then we shot artifacts and then measured the distance to where they landed on the ground, and then plugged those values into the range equation, and then used regression and made a lookup table that translates inches per second into the flywheel speed.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Now, adding that shooting while moving component to this, how are you doing that part specifically?
Yeah, so we use the GoBuilda pinpoint odometry for navigating the field, and this gives us the robot's velocity in the X and Y direction. And using this velocity, we can pretty much add on to the component that goes towards and away from the goal, the launch velocity in that vector, add on the velocity of the robot in that direction. And then for the turret, we can just offset the turret angle based on the velocity moving tangentially to the goal, so perpendicular to the goal. And we used trigonometry to figure out what the hood angle is based on, because we know the position of the goal and we know the position of the robot, and so we can use trigonometry to figure out what the turret angle is, and then we can offset that by the robot's velocity perpendicular to the goal.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. As far as game strategy goes, you guys have a very, very fast autonomous. I think it's 21 artifacts, 18 to 21 artifacts. For pathing in that, how are you guys doing your pathing for that autonomous?
Yeah, so we use the pager pathing library, which we found to be very helpful and very fast. They also have good support in Discord for which we can ask questions about how the source code behind pager pathing works, just so we can optimize our autonomous to the max possible capability of the robot.
And as far as intaking from the gate, how do you guys know when you have 3 artifacts, or is it just time-based? You're always at the gate for the same amount of time?
Yeah, so we have 3 color sensors inside the robot. Do you want to show that? We have 3 color sensors. Those are the 3 lights inside the robot. You can kind of see it down there. So you can see 2 down there. And each of those color sensors are at the position of a ball will be in the intake. And so when we have, for example, when we have 2 artifacts in the robot, it covers the top 2 color sensors. And then we can use that information to figure out when we have 3 artifacts in the robot and then leave and move on to the next task.
Yeah, that's super clever. Have you guys had any issues of the color sensors shooting through the holes in the artifacts, or just because they're spinning that hasn't been an issue for you guys?
Yeah, so we did have that issue at the start. So what we did actually is, because the intake is constantly spinning when we only collected 2 artifacts, the artifacts are also constantly spinning in the transfer. And so what we do is we actually have a timer with the color sensors. So it says if the color sensors detect a ball at all, it would trigger a timer. And at any point in time, it does not detect the artifact because it's shining through a hole. It would also have a time delay before it would actually register that non-detection.
Okay, yeah, that's a very clever solution to that problem. Now, going back to the game strategy discussion, I think in your guys' Teleop, one thing you do really well is just like you're very good at shooting all around the field, and obviously that's enabled by the software you have, but I think a big part of that is also practice. I see a lot of teams that have the algorithms to shoot anywhere on the field, but still always want to go to the top of that close launch zone, right? So how are you guys able to practice effectively so that you are comfortable shooting all around the field?
Yeah, so one thing that has helped us is that me and Oliver, who do the software for the team, we also do the driving. So we have understanding of what the code is actually doing behind each button we press. We've also had like lots of practice. We've done lots of practice matches before the tournament, our last tournament at Miami. And just by testing the robot, we also get a lot of practice like driving around and shooting.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys prefer to do like full practice matches, or are you kind of just like, let's start with a charged battery and just run the robot in the field until the battery runs out of charge? How do you guys approach practice sessions?
I think we definitely prefer just getting to the groove, just cycling back and forth, practicing cycling. For example, cycling from the gate, going from the gate to the close zone, we practice a lot. Also from the gate to the far zone, or just clean up on the field. So if we have we scatter artifacts on the field and we practice driving around those, picking them up and then shooting them to the goal.
Very cool, very cool. As far as any really helpful Teleop automations you guys have, anything that you think rookie teams can really learn from to level up their games?
Yeah, so I think one of the main features in Teleop that helps us is we automatically raise the intake when we've collected 3 artifacts. This prevents us ever accidentally controlling more than 3 artifacts, which will help us from getting penalties. Another good feature we have is just how our turret always tracks the goal. So we don't ever have to tell the turret to target the goal at all. It will be constantly tracking the goal, constantly changing the flywheel speed and hood angle based on the distance to the goal. And this has really been helpful in driving because the driver doesn't ever have to focus on, hey, the hood's off, so we have to fix that.
Mm-hmm. And what does your guys' calibration look like? I've noticed in the beginning of your matches, you'll kind of go to the center of the field and sit there for a second and then continue driving. So what does that calibration look like for the turret angle?
Yeah, so we actually have a limelight on the back of our robot. This limelight, we use it because like I mentioned before, we use odometry to track a robot's position on the field at all times for the turret. So this limelight, we actually use it to re-zero the robot on the field via the April tags on the goal, right at the start of each match to make sure we're not off, and that'll make sure that the shooter will always be tracking the goal.
I see. And why put the limelight on the back of your robot as opposed to on the turret or something like we've seen other teams do?
We wanted the limelight because it does not have a global shutter. We wanted to make sure that it would not vibrate because the flywheel spinning can have some vibration with it. Also, the turret's moving. We wanted just to have a solid mounting position, and also
Sure.
one that's not dependent on if the turret ever gets off in a match. It might be hard to point the turret at the goal to get the limelight to re-zero.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. All right, Gyrobotic Droids, thank you guys so much. I mean, you guys just have such an incredible robot, very compact but very elegant, and I just can't wait to see how you guys do in the rest of the Decode season. So reporting for Fun Robotics Network, I'm Abbas, and this is Team 23435, Gyrobotic Droids. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to stay up to date on future fun videos. FRCTs has been trusted by over 250 first teams to save on custom shirts and team apparel. Founded by first alumni and offering a free 14-day turnaround with faster options available, you can save time and money for your team when you get a free quote by scanning the QR code or going to frcts.com. Take on the Decode season with Studica Robotics, featuring their FTC starter bot, new 6mm hex shaft and motor options, and updated bevel gears. FTC teams can receive a 25% discount and apply for grants at studica.com/robots.